I'm thankful for my privileges every single day. It's Penuel the Black Pen. So while I was walking this morning at the Johannesburg Botanical Gardens in the northern suburbs of Johannesburg, where I enjoy my privilege, I found myself thinking about how we lack knowledge and information, and a lot of people are largely ignorant. There are so many people that when I say things like Penuel is God, they obviously get upset. They say I'm blaspheming, all these other things. Religious people, it's fine, it's their prerogative. Then I've heard people say things like, yeah, you call yourself God, but you'd never call yourself Allah because you're scared of Muslims and the like. Look, it's an ignorance I had, but I'm here to school some of you that don't know. But the term Allah is Arabic for God. It is not a name of a god like Zeus. It is a word in Arabic for God. In isiZulu, we'd say uNkulunkulu, or in generic Nguni terms, Xhosa, Ndebele, Swati, we'd say uThixo, Mvelinqangi, Kamata, uNkulunkulu. So when people say you'd never call yourself Allah, by saying I am God, it literally means the same thing. Then I started thinking about Boko Haram because there's this term now. It's an insurgent militant group in Nigeria that kidnap girls. And the reality is when you actually research Boko Haram, and I'm not here to defend them, I'm not sure of the atrocities they've committed, etc. The term haram is so there's halal and haram in Islam, which is basically good and evil, or what's deemed religiously correct and religiously frowned upon, like sinning. So the whole Boko Haram concept and the thought is Western infiltration, fake indoctrination, which is not according to Sharia and according to Islamic law. And what these people were trying to do, they ended up becoming a militant group, like Umkhonto weSizwe, which was the ANC military wing, like I think IAPLA, which I'm not sure if it was the AZAP or the PAC military wing, like the Black Panthers party or movement in America. And they were saying, look, we're tired of people peddling this fake Islam, which is not in line with real Islam. And they were saying, they went and they built schools to say, we would like to take the children, and particularly the girls, to make sure that they are living in a correct Islamic way. It's literally like what's happened with the Pope, what's happened with a lot of Christian schools, which have been more open to homosexuality, transgender, etc. And you get a militant Christian wing that will say something like, this is not what the Bible stands for. This is not what Christ believed in. This is not what the Abrahamic God believes in. And they go and they build a school, a saint, whatever. Because we've got the saints now, which are welcoming of all kinds of things that are considered sins in the Bible. You know, you've literally got people getting drunk on school campuses. You've got teachers that have tattoos. And you've got schools that are welcoming of alternative sexuality, which are sins in the Bible. So someone comes and says, we're not going to do this. We're going to take the children and make sure that they learn real Christianity. And then they're obviously painted by alternative groups as wrong. And if the alternative groups are loud, all of a sudden it becomes, this is a terrorist organization, it's wrong. A lot of the girls, the Bring Back Our Girls campaign, a lot of the girls never went back home because they weren't necessarily kidnapped the way you think. It was literally like, this is a school, and for parents that believe in Islam and being Muslim, they were like, our children are going to go here. And some of these girls over time ended up getting married and having children. And for some people that looked like human trafficking, etc. I don't know how many of the girls were indeed kidnapped, trafficked, maybe if some of them were raped, etc. I'm trying to give a perspective on some of the people that were doing that. I'm giving this perspective because South Africa has been grey-listed, and I've spoken about this, by the West, in particular America. And they are grey-listed because they claim that some of the cash flows leaving South Africa fund terrorist organizations. The rest of us, because we buy into American media, we're like, oh, this is bad. Funding terrorism in the Middle East or in Asia or whatever. They might be funding Russia. The reality is not the way you think. So look at this perspective. If you were to visit an Iraq, an Iran, maybe a Russia, or some other country that America doesn't have favorable relationships with, or relations at least, you might find those countries telling you, you guys as South Africans fund terrorism. And you're like, what do you mean? And they're like, well, you eat McDonald's and you eat KFC and you watch Netflix and you use YouTube and Facebook. So you're funding terrorism. You're like, dog, that's bullshit. I just fucking have a burger and a piece of chicken and I watch movies. Like, but do you realize that those are American platforms and companies, and as long as you're consuming those, that money goes to America. And when it gets to America, it funds their military, which is arguably the largest, if not the largest, and the most funded military in the world. America's got over 600 military bases around the world. And if you go and you research the countries that America has invaded and bombed and the number of innocent people they have killed. Last year, they were bombing Somalia, an African country. Those people would be like, you guys are funding terrorism. But because we consume American media and not Middle Eastern or alternative African or Asian media, to us, we're like, no, but we're doing the right thing. It's literally like the Christian Crusades, where the Christians were going around killing millions of people in the name of Jesus Christ and what is right. So when America comes and tells us we're funding terrorism, it's almost like you buying from a spaza shop that is owned by Somalians, Pakistanis. It's you buying from or getting your hair cut at a salon, getting your car fixed from a Nigerian. And these guys take their profits and they send them to their home countries, to their families, etc. And in those home countries, once the money arrives, some of it goes to fund their agendas, their propaganda, their military wings, their alternative views on the world. And some of them, when an American army comes in to fight, these people have weapons, they have guns, they can do things. And America wants us to then buy in and say, oh, but that's terrorism. It's terrorism from an American perspective, but it's liberation from an alternative perspective. The African National Congress, the ANC, at some point was deemed a terrorist organization. And Nelson Mandela, as one of the leaders, was deemed one of the most wanted people in the United States of America. And it took South Africans going into exile and going out into the rest of the world to tell a story, to be like, we are not terrorists. We are trying to liberate ourselves from oppression. That's what Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, some of these other nations have been trying to do. But because we feed into this Western media, we believe they're wrong. It's like the Israel-Palestine argument. When you actually track the history of what happened with Israel and Palestine, you realize that this is some form of an invasion, arguably like Russia and Ukraine, where Palestine had a piece of land, the Israelis came through, they got their piece of land, and now they claim this is their birthright, this is their land, they want all of it. And conflict erupts. And then you are forced to pick a side based on whether you support the Muslims in Palestine or whether you support the Jewish people of Israel. And now it depends on who runs businesses in your country, who runs the media in your country, who is running the cash flows and the banks and the funding agencies in your country. And now you're forced to pick a side, and your media, your mainstream media, is forced to pick a side because they're funded by certain people with certain agendas. Al Jazeera, Russia Today, I think, there's Chinese news, there's some of them you think represent a voice, but you might find they're funded by the same people. You're like, yeah, but CNN said, but Fox News said, but the SAPC said, but ET, and you're like, guys, there are people with agendas in the world, and they force you to pick a side, and you might find that the side you're picking doesn't even care about you or your people, whoever your people may be. I spoke recently about the shootings and the killings in Westbury. I think 9 to 11 people were killed and 2 people died last I checked. And I went and I like, guys, can we please stop the violence? People have told me that, a lot of them are drug related because there's drug turf wars in Westbury, obviously in the Cape Flats, in America, in the projects, it used to be the same thing. And it is nice and cute for us to be like, oh, drugs are bad. People in Westbury are killing each other over, oh, the taxi violence is bad. People are killing each other over taxi routes. Or people are killing each other over tenders. The reality is at the highest levels, this is happening. What is happening with Russia and Ukraine is a turf war. It's no different to what's happening in Westbury. But obviously, we're going to be like, oh, what's bad? It's bad in Westbury. But we might understand what's happening in Russia, Ukraine. When the British Empire was colonizing South Africa and other nations under what they call the Commonwealth today, that was turf wars, and they killed and they oppressed people. And you're like, yeah, but that's different. It's got nothing to do with drugs. And you're like, but what are pharmaceutical companies? Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, and all these other, are they not drugs? Are they not coming to set up, no, we will push our pharmaceuticals here, which people will become addicted to, because drugs are addictive, or at least even legal drugs. But then what's one of the biggest killers in the world? It's diabetes. It's a bad, healthy lifestyle. It's a bad lifestyle and an unhealthy lifestyle. Your McDonald's, your KFCs, your fast food outlets that they come and they plant in your countries. Those are the ones getting people fat. And look, some of these foods and these saturated fats and all these things, These things are addictive to you. You crave them. And what does that happen? It ends up giving you cholesterol, high blood, clogs your arteries and your heart, and you die of diabetes, heart disease, etc. And you're like, no, but that's different. Because the guys in Westbury, the guys in the Cape Flats, the guys in other spaces, they are also trying to get by. They're going to be like, I'm trying to feed my family. And you're like, but it's with drugs, dog. It's like, yeah, but you're feeding people unhealthy fast food, dog. And you're pumping people with drugs, dog, with side effects that can potentially kill them. We're dealing with turf wars, and it's almost all the same, but at different scales and different levels. And I remember saying that, the world is run by gangs. Some of the gangs are very basic. It's a taxi route, it's a drug, it's drugs, territory, my neighborhood. But some of them, it's literally colonization, land. Some of them, it's ideologies. Islamic Christian wars, which I think still happen in places like Nigeria. Could be African spirituality versus religion. It could be tribal wars, the Zulus versus the Xhosas. It could be the Tutsis versus the Hutus and the Tutsis. I'm not sure of the name, the Hutus and the Tutsis in Rwanda. Russia and Ukraine, these were all part of the Soviet Union, but now they clash where they were brothers and sisters. Xenophobic attacks with Zimbabweans and Mozambicans and the like. We're constantly fighting over land and idea and who should control what. Had an amazing conversation with a new mentor of mine now, and he was giving me the history of why the British Empire is so strong. And one of the things he was painting is there are 3-4 things that run the British Empire. And one of them is the monarch, which is the kings. Another one is religion. Another one is the aristocracy, which is the noblemen, the rich people. And he was saying what the monarchs and the kings do is they normally look after the land. Even in Africa, it was the kings that ran the land. Someone needs to oversee and be the custodian of the land. Then you look at the religious leaders, the clergy. Those people look after the mind. They have the ideologies and the beliefs. So when you're saying things like God save the queen or God save the king, it is the clergymen that are getting everyone to believe in this land belongs to the king and the queen, and you guys must be willing to kill and die for the sovereignty of this land. And then the aristocracy, which is the noblemen and the noblewomen and the rich, they're the ones that fund the operations. They can fund the army, they fund the church, the building of the churches, the schools, which push all of this indoctrination. And then the fourth pillar he was speaking about was knowledge. The idea that most of the prime ministers either went to Oxford or Cambridge. And if you look at some of the greatest world leaders, a lot of them maybe did their postgraduate qualifications or some courses in Oxford, Cambridge. Some get sent to Harvard because these guys have some type of monopoly on the ideology and the mindset of how to run countries. Apparently, Hendrik Verwoerd, who was the father of apartheid, I believe. I don't know if he was a doctor in psychology and I think sociology, but I think he was also meant to have studied or got some guidance from those type of places. The world is constantly at a battle for ideology, mindset, and there are so many ignorant people that don't understand these things. And when some of us speak about these things, we're blaspheming, we don't know what we're speaking about, we're scared of these people, we don't quite understand. One of the questions you need to ask yourself is, why is African spirituality rising now? It's because with more and more people calling bullshit on Christianity, on Islam, on Judaism, the people that run the world are like, give them something else that will still kind of control them and get them to behave. Give them something that they're familiar with that looks like it's theirs. Because there's nothing different with a Jesus figure and some African spiritual leader who also preaches Ubuntu, which is passive community building, non-violence. Because we can't teach these people violence and the like. And if we're going to teach them about alternative medicines and herbs, because we kind of control the land and the narrative, they will come and get their herbs from us. And it will be called organic. We will do green and sustainable energy. So it's fine as long as this African spirituality arises in a way that we can kind of control. And then we'll give them the type of leaders that are similar to church pastors and preachers and bishops that are still going to teach a very timid, passive, umuntu ngabantu type of ideology. Because once you start preaching this idea of being a lion and being wild and saying we must kill and we must dominate, we must colonize, African spirituality has got nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with fighting back and mass murder and colonization and impregnating your enemy's children. Nothing. So it's still fine. They keep to themselves. They're peaceful. They live in the earth. They play in the sun. It's okay. It's a battle for ideology. It's a battle for land. It's a battle for resources. And ultimately, we must all then worship kings, queens, who are supposedly ordained by gods. I'm God. And the sooner I can teach other people to find the God in them, the sooner it's going to be easier for you to not be polluted from external factors, because you will know what is right within yourself. And if you are not strong enough mentally to lead yourself and be your own God, I'm here to be an alternative. I'm here to be an alternative. One of the cool things my mentor said to me was, if you look at the different religious groups, they come from different geographies. And I wasn't even thinking about these things. The Roman Catholic Church was born when the Roman Empire was dominating, hence Roman Catholic Church. When the British Empire rose, English, Anglican, the Anglican Church rose up. The Germans wanted to have their own power base, and that's where the Lutheran Church, I think it's Martin Luther who led that, the Lutheran Church came up. And then all these other churches. In South Africa, obviously we've got Isonto Lama Nazareta, which is the Shembe Church. Again, Shembe rose as an African spiritual Christian leader. Something just quite interesting to think about. Just sharing some of my thoughts. Hope you'll have a great and a blessed and a productive day. Pin you all the black pen.